Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salalo Makudiri. Now to our top story this morning, one that's been making headlines overnight. President Cyril Ramaphosa has appointed Roelf Meyer as South Africa's new ambassador to the United States. He's a veteran negotiator, and he's going to be stepping into a role that's becoming increasingly sensitive. Relations between South Africa and the US have gone through a very, very turbulent phase, including the fallout surrounding South Africa's previous ambassador, Ibrahim Rasool, who was essentially booted out, kicked out of the United States, and also the broader disagreement over foreign policy positioning between the two countries. Meyer, best known for his role in South Africa's transition to democracy, worked quite closely with President Cyril Ramaphosa during the negotiations that got us what we now call and understand to be democracy and freedom in South Africa. And now he's going to be taking on the task of, shall we say, steadying the ship of one of the country's most critical diplomatic relationships since the dawn of democracy. And it'll be interesting to see if his appointment is going to yield the results that we hope that it will. How much of it is a strategic reset, and what message is the President and South Africa sending both internationally and here at home by appointing him. And we're going to be unpacking, trying to answer all of those questions with our international relations expert and analyst, Dr. Oscar van Heerden, who's joining us on our virtual platform. Doc, always a pleasure being on the show. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Solana. Good morning to your listeners.
And I think we'll jump right into it. Your initial thoughts on why Roelf Meyer was appointed at this particular moment, him as a personality. Do you think he's the right man to try and steady the ship when it comes to South Africa and US relations?
Solana, you've got a serious echo. Yeah, I think it's quite an intelligent decision. One would say about the decision of President Ramaphosa to choose Roelf Meyer. In many ways, we have to understand that we are, as you say in your insert, trying to manage a very tense relationship with the Trump administration. We know, for example, that the Trump administration is engaged in a punitive campaign against South Africa for a number of reasons. And anyone that we tried to send that has some history in making comments about America in a negative way, about imperialism, indeed about the Trump administration itself, was unacceptable for Marco Rubio and the State Department. And so the choice of Roelf Meyer, a white Afrikaner, one of the people that Trump claims is being genocided in South Africa, also associated with the former apartheid government. So it's going to be very difficult for the Trump administration and for Marco Rubio to find a reason to say, we don't want Roelf Meyer.
And I think that's very important, and I think it ties in a bit with my next question. From the president's perspective, do you think he was looking at exactly that, the fact that Roelf Meyer is a white Afrikaner man, and he fits the mold of what, as you mentioned, the United States of America says these are a genocide people, this is a group that is ostracized? Or is there an underlying message there? And what would you say would be his first key mission once he gets to Washington?
Yeah, no, that was definitely one of the key considerations. I mean, one wouldn't want to use that as a criteria for any ambassador, but in this case, it's quite evident that we need to play the game according to the Trump and Marco Rubio situation. So those considerations were definitely taken on board in the same way, Solano, that President Ramaphosa, when he went to Washington, D.C., to the Oval Office, he took 3 Afrikaner men with him, in terms of Johan Rupert, and Ernie Els, and so on and so forth. And it was to sort of demonstrate that we have white Afrikaners in South Africa that is willing and able to carry and bear the flag for South Africa, regardless of these falsehoods and untruths about genocide and so forth. So no, I think that was a key consideration. They thought very carefully, but of course, as you know, Roelf Meyer and President Ramaphosa also has a history. They are friends. They trust each other. They were together in the negotiations and the crafting of the Constitution of the Republic. So they go way back. And I think that Ramaphosa would have invited Roelf to the office and sat him down and said, look, tenuous relationship, tension is brewing. We're trying to mend this thing. This is our objective as South Africa. And we trust that you are willing and able and have the skill set to go to Washington to try and mend these relationships.
I want to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to take a step back and maybe reflect on what went wrong with our previous ambassador Rasul, and also at what point, at what critical point can we point to South Africa and US relations souring almost? Is there a specific point we can point to? It was something that was a long time coming. And also, just looking at Meyer himself, again, coming back to what would you say would be his key priority once he lands in Washington and takes office? But we'll touch on those after the short break.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
When disaster strikes, families lose everything in an instant. Homes destroyed, communities displaced. Hope fades into uncertainty. Our Global Emergency Fund ensures we respond without delay, delivering food, water, shelter, and healthcare to families in need. To support our Global Emergency Fund, visit islamicrelief.org.za.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Welcome back. So tuned into News with myself, Salah Heerden, and in conversation with international relations expert Dr. Oscar van Heerden, again looking at South Africa and the United States relations, and also the biggest story coming out last night. President Cyril Ramaphosa finally appointing a new ambassador, a new South African ambassador to the United States, Roelf Meyer, and we're unpacking his profile, what are some of his key responsibilities or some of the first areas of concern that he probably needs to undertake once he gets to the United States of America. And Prof, thank you for staying with us. Before we went into that short break, I want us to reflect a bit on the moment that you can point out to say this was a pivotal moment that ultimately led to South African and US relations souring. Was something that has been a long time coming. And with this new quote-unquote administration and delegation representing to the US, what can we do differently if there is anything?
Yeah, you know, Salah, that's an interesting question, because I would venture to say that when South Africa became a member of BRICS is where I think tensions arose between South Africa and Washington, D.C. Remember that this is not only a Trump administration. In other words, it's not only the Republican party that has a problem with us. Even under the previous dispensation of the Biden administration, which was a Democrat administration, Ambassador Rickety took issue with South Africa in relation to the war that was unfolding and happening between Russia and Ukraine, where he also made certain falsehoods and untruths, lies about the fact that South Africa is selling arms to Russia, that there was Lady R in Simonstown, and you know the story. And that's where there was already tensions brewing. So I think it was a United States of America, the unipolar hegemon, superpower, that is now having to contend with its power whittling away and having to embrace a multipolar world where the US is no longer the superpower. And I think in looking at that kind of global setting and an emergence of BRICS that threatens that hegemony, I think that's when they took aim at South Africa first and foremost. And that's why we had tensions brewing with Ambassador Brigitte. Then, of course, coming into the Trump administration, the South African government decided that in another conflict that was unfolding in Israel-Palestine, that the South African government decided to take the state of Israel and the Israeli government to the International Court of Justice on the charge of genocide, which is being perpetrated as we speak, still against the peoples of Gaza and increasingly in the West Bank as well. And that was the final nail in the coffin, as they say, because the Trump administration then took issue and aim at the South Africans.
Let's talk Meyer's, I don't know, key responsibility right now. What would be, the first task at hand here once it gets to Washington? Is it to try and reset, recalibrate relations with the United States of America? What if you were in his shoes and you were just appointed ambassador to the United States for South Africa? Where would you start? Where would you start as an ambassador? I don't know, try and stable the ship, so to say.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, the starting point would obviously be, like in the case of their own ambassador here in South Africa, the president had to accept the credentials of Ambassador Bozal, meaning that we accept that you are here, you are the official representative of the United States, and we welcome you here, and we will give you any and all cooperation going forward. So that would be the first step. As you know, we've been struggling since Ambassador Rasool was expelled as a persona non grata. They did not want to give the special envoy Mcobisi Jonas a visa. So I think the starting point for Roelf and the first tick of the box would be that his credentials is accepted by Marco Rubio and the State Department. Once that step is covered and we know that we now officially have an accepted ambassador to the United States, I think the starting point is you're dealing with a very intransigent administration. And so I don't think that should be the starting point. Once Marco Rubio and the president of the US accept the credentials of Roelf Meyer, I would imagine the starting point immediately would be to deal with all other parties except the administration. In other words, meeting with the Democratic Party, meeting with the Black Caucus in Congress, meeting with some civil society groups and so forth, to try and indicate to them that this political campaign that is undertaken by the Trump administration is unfair, unjust, and is unnecessary. So that would be the starting point. And then, of course, like any other ambassador, you would begin to start concentrating on the trade and industry and begin to say that we are still trying to conclude a bilateral trade agreement with the United States. And I think the ambassador will have to play a part in facilitating and coaching and massaging that relationship with people from our side, like Minister Parks Tau, Minister Steenhuisen, etc., but also bringing the Americans closer. So I think that would be a key concentration once he addressed, first and foremost, the messaging that there is no white genocide, that we are acting out of principle in terms of the state of Israel and so forth. I think that would be the key undertakings for the new ambassador.
And I think it would be interesting to see how he's received. The message from President Ramaphosa and just Pretoria has been quite unequivocal. It was always, we won't be bullied, we won't buckle under the pressure of any other country. South Africa is a sovereign country, and we make decisions based on our policies and how we interpret what needs to be done at that moment. It has been a very appreciated stance by a lot of South Africans standing up to the United States of America. But people are asking the question, appointing a profile like that of Meyer, as you mentioned, white Afrikaner, a figure that is associated with South Africa's negotiating settlements, into transitioning to democracy. Isn't that in itself buckling under the pressure, giving the United States of America an ambassador that they would accept instead of maybe the one that would traditionally be preferred by South Africa, like the former Ibrahim Rasool?
Yeah, that could be one view, Salalo. You know, the truth of the matter is that we are playing international relations chessboard. And at the moment, the Trump player is outmaneuvering us because they are not allowing us in. So the reality is that we need to play the game. It's not necessarily the rules that we want to follow. It's not necessarily our rules, but we want a foot in the door. Because if you don't have a formal representative in the form of an ambassador in a country, then already you don't have an official mouthpiece. And so the starting point is to try and satisfy that requirement. Let's have someone there that we can engage with. And so, yeah, some people might think that it's not a clever move, but it is strategic. And let me also just repeat the point I made earlier. It is someone that the South African government and the president can trust. They worked with this person before. Remember, Salalo, this is not the first time that members of the opposition, if I can call it like that, have become ambassadors. This is a trend and a practice that was instituted and begun under the Mbeki administration, where we saw, for example, former leaders of the opposition, the Democratic Alliance, Tony Leon, became ambassador to Argentina. We know Douglas Gibson became an ambassador. And IFP leaders were given postings overseas. The question here is that, is Roelf Meyer going to advance the objectives of the South African government, of the South African people, and of South African businesses? And will he adhere to the prescripts of the Constitution of the Republic? And the answer is unequivocally he will, yes. And so I think that people must see it in that vein. It's not about capitulating. You know, sometimes, as the saying goes, you must take 2 steps back in order to advance 4 steps. And trying to insist on our own preferred candidate, who is supposedly, for argument's sake, an ANC person, was just not going to fly. And we've seen it. And let me also be clear. The Trump administration and President Trump himself is very unpredictable. I think this is a clever and intelligent choice. I think Roelf Meyer can begin to heal tensions between South Africa and the United States. He has the skill set. He has the negotiating skills and so forth. But the Trump administration might very well say, no, we're not interested in Roelf Meyer either, because the campaign that they are running against South Africa dictates such that they don't want any representation of South Africa in Washington, D.C. So we will still have to see whether we get over that first hurdle, which is the acceptance of the character and the individual in the form of Roelf Meyer.
I think we're going to leave it there for now, Doc. Really appreciate you giving us the time, and I think that's where I think you and I might probably speak again, whether or not you'll be accepted, his credentials will be accepted by US President Donald Trump, and the next steps from there. It's going to be a really critical moment, but we're going to leave it for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rich.
There we go. Dr. Oscar van Heerden, international relations expert, give us insights on the appointment of Roelf Meyer as the new ambassador to the United States for South Africa, appointed by President Cyril Ramaphosa. He's a seasoned negotiator, worked quite closely with the president during the CODESA negotiations, the transition to South Africa's democracy. White Afrikaner male, fitting the mold of, according to the United States, what is an ostracized demographic in South Africa, genocided demographic in South Africa, which the United States of America is wide open its doors. I saw an article that more than 4,000 or more than 5,000 refugees have made their way to the United States under the guise of persecution from South Africa, and all of them white Afrikaners. So it's going to be interesting. You can engage with us. Our studio line is 01168003555 on WhatsApp, 061-766-0355. Do you think the president made the right choice? Do you think Roelf Meyer is the man who can stabilize relations between the United States of America and South Africa? Or do you feel the president buckled under the pressure of the mighty US? Do you think giving someone with the name like Roelf Meyer, skin color like that of Roelf Meyer, and the profile of Roelf Meyer is essentially buckling under the pressure of the United States of America? We are giving them what they want, which is white male Afrikaner. It's going to be really interesting times ahead. It'll be interesting to see whether or not his credentials will be accepted by Washington. We all wait with bated breath for that. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. Hashtag Africa Focus, and we're heading over to Nigeria.